You hear silk tightening. Not in your imagination, but across time. A ribbon twisting, silent and merciless, around the throat of a sleeping emperor. The year is 1542. 16 women, barely more than girls, move like phantoms across cold marble. Their breath is shallow. Their hands tremble. They are not assassins by choice, they are slaves by decree, trapped in the suffocating labyrinth of the imperial harem. And tonight, in the forbidden city, they attempt the unthinkable, to strangle the Son of Heaven himself. But history tells us they're not slipped, their courage failed, their punishment unspeakable. Not death by sword, but death by 1,000 cuts, flesh stripped away piece by piece until only agony remained. That is how China's most powerful empire reminded its women, rebellion was not only treason, it was an invitation to be erased. The harem was no garden of beauty. It was an engine of control. A vault where power, sex, and fear were bound tighter than steel. Behind red walls and golden rooftops, the world was told a story of majesty. But inside? It was a prison of flesh, one that consumed thousands of girls for centuries, feeding a system older than memory. This was not about pleasure. It was about domination, succession, and the machinery of empire. Every whisper, every glance, every breath of those women was monitored, documented, and weaponized. Imagine being 14, torn from your village, dragged past gates taller than castles, into corridors that never ended. You would never see your mother again. Never see the river you once bathed in. From that day forward, you belonged to the emperor, and to the cruel hierarchy of women who clawed at each other like caged beasts, each desperate to rise, each terrified to fall. The empress was called the mother of the world. But beneath her, titles were meaningless protections against a single fact: at any moment, you could vanish. Poison tea. A silken cord. Or simply the endless silence of being forgotten behind locked doors. The tourists who walk the forbidden city today see beauty. They see dragons carved in stone. They see golden roofs catching the light. What they don't see, what they were never meant to see, are the screams that once echoed in the night. The halls are empty, but the ghosts are still there. And they whisper truths that history tried to bury. Every 3 years, the empire swept its net across the land. No home was safe. No family exempt. Officials scoured villages, towns, and cities, searching for young girls between the ages of 14 and 16. Beauty mattered, yes, but beauty alone was not enough. Bloodline, obedience, docility, and the absence of a strong will were far more valuable. The chosen would vanish into the forbidden city, their names erased from family records, their futures rewritten. Parents wept silently, but what could they do? Refuse, and the emperor's wrath would not just take your daughter, it would consume your entire bloodline. The girl who once played by rivers and laughed with friends was now a numbered shadow, ranked in an invisible hierarchy of concubines. Above her, layers upon layers of women, consorts, attendants, empresses, each clawing for scraps of influence. A wrong glance could destroy you. A whispered rumor could condemn you. One sip of bitter tea could end your life before your beauty had even faded. Inside these crimson walls, nothing belonged to you, not your body, not your choices, not even your silence. But the most grotesque pillar of this system was not the women. It was the men who weren't men at all. The eunuchs. To protect the emperor's bloodline, no intact male was allowed near the harem. And so, boys as young as 8 were seized, mutilated, and broken in ritual surgeries that killed nearly half of them. Those who survived were stripped not only of their manhood, but of their place in society. They became the emperor's instruments, spies, servants, keepers of secrets. Neither fully male nor female, they belonged nowhere, yet their loyalty was enforced through the brutality of their mutilation. Picture it clearly. A boy screaming on the floor, held down as a knife carves away both root and seed. The wound festers. The fever burns. And if he lives as half a ghost, despised by other men, yet forced into the emperor's service for life. His reward? Power stolen from whispers, influence gleaned from watching women who hated him, trusted him, needed him. He became both gatekeeper and executioner of secrets. This was not romance. This was not beauty. The harem was a weaponized institution, a cage of silk and blood, designed to break women, to remake men, and to bind every soul inside to the throne of absolute power. Dawn in the Forbidden City was never silent. It was the sound of silk rustling like 1,000 whispers, of footsteps soft as dust, of servants moving in choreographed precision. To live in the harem was to live under constant watch. Every gesture mattered. Every word was catalogued. Even silence was dangerous, because silence could be read as defiance. Imagine waking each morning knowing that unseen eyes were recording not just your movements, but your thoughts, or at least, what they believed your thoughts to be. The emperor's intimacy was not private. It was a ritual. When he selected a woman, her name was written in vermilion ink by clerks who recorded every detail of his desires. The emperor did not choose freely, even his nights were regulated, rotated, scheduled like a ledger of flesh. Women were bathed, perfumed, examined for purity. Their time in his bed was clocked, documented, filed away like state secrets. In this way, even the most personal act became a tool of empire. For the women, survival meant adaptation. Some chose submission, burying their true selves so deeply that even they forgot who they once were. Others became masters of manipulation, weaving alliances, planting rumors, and learning how to weaponize beauty and silence. A smile could be a blade. A glance could be poison. The harem was a battlefield without swords, and yet the casualties were countless. But beneath this elaborate theater of control lay something darker, the constant reminder that you were replaceable. The harem could house thousands. If you fell from favor, you weren't always executed, sometimes you were simply discarded, left to rot in a corner of the palace, your existence erased as though you had never been chosen at all. And this, perhaps, was more terrifying than death, to be forgotten, invisible, a ghost trapped in silk robes. The women fought not just for the emperor's attention, but for survival itself. To bear a son was the highest victory, the only path to true influence. But bearing a son also painted a target on your back. Other women would seek to poison him, to destroy the child before he could grow into power. In this way, motherhood became both weapon and curse. Every smile in the harem hid a threat. Every laugh concealed a wound. And every woman knew the truth, behind those golden roofs, she was not living. She was enduring. Power inside the Forbidden City wore many masks. The emperor was the son of heaven, yes, but he was only one man. The true machinery of control extended far beyond his gaze, into the invisible networks of women and eunuchs who ruled through whispers, suspicion, and terror. And at the center of this dark web stood the empress. Officially, she was the mother of the world. In truth, she was a warden, both feared and despised, because her survival depended on balancing cruelty with ceremony. The empress did not need a sword. Her weapon was the hierarchy itself. She controlled food, clothing, promotions, punishments. With a word, she could elevate a girl from obscurity to prominence, or she could bury her in silence, exiling her to the forgotten quarters where women went to dissolve into shadows. Poison tea, subtle accidents, sudden illness, these became signatures of her invisible hand. And yet, the empress herself was not free. She too was a prisoner of appearances, trapped by expectation, watched by the eunuchs, vulnerable to the emperor's shifting favor. Her throne was velvet, but beneath it were blades. Fear was not a side effect of the harem. Fear was its operating system. The women were taught that obedience was survival, suspicion was wisdom, and trust was suicide. In this atmosphere, psychological control replaced chains. You did not need iron shackles when paranoia could do the same work. The women policed each other. They destroyed rivals before rivals could destroy them. The system turned victims into executioners, until no one could tell where the cruelty ended and where survival began. But perhaps the most sinister truth was this: the emperor himself often withdrew from the harem's chaos, leaving its internal wars to devour his women. This was no accident. It was design. By forcing the women to fight among themselves, he ensured that none could unite against him. It was divide and rule, played not with armies, but with silken veils and poisoned cups. Pause and consider this: a palace with 20,000 women, yet every single one believed herself utterly alone. That was the genius of the system. That was its cruelty. And it is here, right now, that you must ask yourself a question most men never dare to face: if such a system could control them, could it not also control you? Now listen carefully. If you've followed me this far, type into the comments, "Silk hides the blade." Silk hides the blade. Write it twice. Not for me. For yourself. To prove you are not just a watcher, but a man who marks transformation when he sees it. To understand the harem, you must strip away the illusions of silk and perfume. At its core, it was not about beauty. It was not about desire. It was about heirs, the manufacturing of sons to secure dynasties, to extend the emperor's shadow across generations. Each womb became a political weapon, each pregnancy a declaration of war. When a concubine bore a son, her status transformed overnight. She could rise from obscurity to immense influence, shielded by the power of her child. But that blessing carried a curse. A newborn prince was both treasure and target. Poison was slipped into milk. Blankets went missing in the cold of winter. Infants died suddenly, at suspiciously convenient moments. The harem was not a nursery, it was a battlefield where children paid the price for ambition. The eunuchs, mutilated into loyalty, became the record keepers of these bloodline struggles. Every birth was documented, every death noted with bureaucratic precision. But the records we see today are sanitized shadows. What they don't reveal are the whispered conspiracies, the hands that smothered, the cups of tea that never should have been trusted. The harem did not only destroy women, it consumed the empire's future, one child at a time. And what of the emperor himself? He was both the architect and the victim of this system. Surrounded by women he could never fully trust, guided by eunuchs who owed their loyalty to survival, he lived in a world where intimacy was statecraft. His bed was not his own. His nights were calculated. Secretaries dipped brushes in vermilion ink, recording every woman he touched, every moment he spent, every heir conceived. What should have been private became political, and what should have been human became mechanical. But in this cold machinery, something monstrous emerged. Sons grew into rivals. Brothers turned into enemies. Succession was not a peaceful handover of power, but a war fought in corridors, in chambers, in the silence of the harem. Princes plotted against each other before they had even grown beards. And behind every plot stood a mother, desperate, cunning, ruthless, willing to sacrifice everything for the child who carried her fragile hope. The empire may have stretched across mountains and rivers, but its fate was decided in whispers behind silk curtains. The harem was not a side note in Chinese history. It was its heart, a dark, beating engine that determined who would rule, who would die, and who would be erased from memory. The harem was not an isolated prison. It was a mirror of empire itself. What happened inside those red walls was a concentrated version of what happened across the land, the many ruled by the few, the powerless devouring each other while the throne remained untouchable. Isolation was the first weapon. The women were severed from family, cut off from their pasts, forbidden from letters or visits. When you erase a person's roots, you make them easier to control. Do you not see the same pattern in nations? Men cut off from truth, fed only what power allows, stripped of their ability to see beyond the walls built around them. Surveillance was the second weapon. Every whisper in the harem was noted, every smile or silence twisted into a record of loyalty or betrayal. The women learned that nothing was private. In the empire outside, the same lesson was taught: neighbors spied on neighbors, servants on masters, sons on fathers. Fear made everyone an informer. Trust collapsed. And once trust is gone, control is absolute. Desire was the final weapon. The emperor's favor was dangled like a jewel, turning women into predators against each other. In this way, love itself was poisoned, not a bond, but a tool of division. And outside the palace, men were taught to desire power, wealth, survival, each baited with promises, each chained by their hunger. You must understand, the harem was not simply the emperor's indulgence. It was a prototype of psychological governance. Strip away the silk, and you see a formula that repeats across centuries: isolate, surveil, weaponize desire, then let the victims destroy one another. It is how rulers outlast revolutions. It is how institutions keep populations obedient while believing themselves free. So when you hear of concubines clawing for favor, of eunuchs whispering lies, of mothers poisoning rival sons, do not imagine this as distant history. Imagine it as a blueprint, one perfected behind palace walls and then applied to the masses. The Forbidden City was not just a palace. It was a laboratory of control. And the question that lingers is not about them. It is about you. Have you truly escaped this design? Or do you still live in a harem without walls, obeying rules you never agreed to, chained by fears you never chose, fighting enemies who are not your enemies at all? The Forbidden City still stands. Its walls glow red in the evening sun, its roofs blaze gold under the sky. Tourists walk its courtyards, snapping photographs, marveling at architecture that once terrified the world. They see beauty. They see grandeur. But they do not hear the silence of those who lived and died inside. They do not feel the cold breath of women who never left those gates, whose names dissolved into dust, whose lives were erased by a system that fed on obedience. The harem is gone. The eunuchs are gone. The emperors are gone. Yet the machinery they perfected has never left. The methods of control, isolation, surveillance, the weaponization of desire, the division of the weak, these remain. They simply changed their clothing. What once hid behind silk curtains now hides in institutions, in media, in laws, in the invisible architecture of your own mind. You are told what to want. You are taught who to hate. You are given enemies that are not enemies, choices that are not choices, freedoms that are not freedoms. The palace is bigger now, the entire world is its courtyard. But the formula is the same: keep men divided, keep them distracted, keep them clawing at each other while the throne remains untouchable. And here is the truth most will never hear: the harem was not about women, or even about the emperor. It was about control perfected through psychology. It was about the creation of an invisible prison so complete that even the prisoners defended it. That is the true legacy of the Forbidden City. That is the dark gift it passed on to every empire that followed. But you, listening now, you were not meant to hear this. You were not meant to see the blueprint. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. Because now you must ask yourself, who benefits from your distractions? Who profits from your division? Who thrives when you are isolated, angry, exhausted, fighting shadows instead of the throne itself? This is not just history. This is instruction. And men who ignore it will repeat it. But men who awaken to it, men who dare to step beyond illusion, they cannot be controlled. So choose. Walk away, forget, return to sleep. Or carry this truth like a blade beneath your silence. Because power has always hidden behind silk. And once you see the blade, you are no longer the same.